To get you up and running as quickly as possible, we've created a series of essentials guides, of which this is the first. We call them essentials guides because they contain vital information that every SiteGrinder user needs to know. We recommend viewing the first 5 or 6 of these guides before you try SiteGrinder. We organized the rest of the essentials guides by feature, so you only need to learn about the techniques that you're using on your particular site. Whenever you try something that you haven't tried before, it will be a good idea to watch the relevant essentials guide first for a quick but thorough introduction. The purpose of the rest of this introductory essentials guide is to give you a quick overview of the most important concepts behind using SiteGrinder. So let's get started. SiteGrinder is a Photoshop plugin, so it operates on Photoshop files. That means you will usually want to have a Photoshop file with some part of a web design open before you invoke SiteGrinder. Unlike most other plugins, SiteGrinder is an automation plugin, so you open it from Photoshop's File, Automate menu. SiteGrinder also includes an application called SiteGrinder Engine that must be running when you're doing pretty much anything with SiteGrinder. Notice, when I launched the plugin in Photoshop, it automatically opened the SiteGrinder Engine application in the background. You won't use the application very much yourself. It's there for the SiteGrinder plugin to use when necessary. The SiteGrinder Engine window does act as a handy quick launch for your last few Photoshop designs and websites. We'll cover the details of using the SiteGrinder plugin window in the Workflow Essentials guides, which are next. For now, let's move on to the Photoshop skills that you need to have in order to use SiteGrinder to its full potential. SiteGrinder uses Photoshop's layer features extensively, so you will need to be familiar with multi-layer Photoshop documents. This includes making new type and image layers, rearranging the layer order in the Layers palette to change their stacking order in the document, styling text using the Character and Paragraph palettes, moving layers around within the document using the Move tool, and other things that most Photoshop users already know how to do. There is one Photoshop feature that SiteGrinder takes advantage of that even many Photoshop addicts haven't used a lot, which is called layer comps. Layer comps are really important for designing multiple different pages within the same Photoshop file, so we provide layer comp training in a separate video. I'll explain how you'll be using these Photoshop skills in conjunction with SiteGrinder to almost magically turn Photoshop files into finished websites. The important work happens at the level of layers. Image layers can become background decorations or buttons, and type layers can become live web text or menus or even forms or even a rendered logo image. SiteGrinder can figure out a surprising amount of this all by itself, but we haven't yet figured out how to get it to read your mind. Some things you will have to tell SiteGrinder explicitly, and you do this by giving certain layers what we call hints. A hint is just a word that you add to the end of a layer's name after a dash. These words are usually so obvious you can guess many of them, like text or button or menu. Some hints can work together with other hints on other layers. You let SiteGrinder know that you want layers to work together by naming them the same thing and giving them different hints. SiteGrinder will take a layer named gallery-hover, for example, and turn it into the hover version of a layer named gallery-button. You can even have multiple hints on a single layer when appropriate. For example, you can create a scrolling text area by adding the text and scroll hints to the same type layer. Some hinted layers won't themselves appear on the web pages you build. Instead, SiteGrinder will use them as placeholders or as boundaries. The most common placeholder hint is probably X media, which is short for external media. When you place that hint on a rectangular layer, SiteGrinder can replace it with something else, like a web video or a flash animation when it builds the web page. When you want to put a drop shadow or frame around a placeholder layer, Create a separate layer behind the placeholder for this because SiteGrinder does completely replace the placeholder on the final page with whatever you tell it to substitute. Similar to placeholder layers are boundary layers. These are also rectangular layers, but these have hints that tell SiteGrinder how to visually organize other smaller layers on a page. A common use of this technique is the thumb sheet hint. SiteGrinder can automatically arrange a grid of thumbnails for gallery navigation within any rectangle you indicate using a layer with the thumb sheet hint. Notice that just like placeholder layers, the boundary layer itself doesn't appear on the final page. Instead, it invisibly controls the positions of other elements. The final kind of hinted layer affects the appearance of your entire design and the browser window itself. Hints like browser background and page size will, on certain layers, determine background colors and tiles and allow you to create differently sized pages. And if you like, you can choose a non-centered page alignment using these kinds of hints. We've now covered the most basic concepts behind using SiteGrinder. At this point, you should go on to part 1 of the Workflow Essentials Guide to learn the process of taking a Photoshop document with hinted layers and getting it into a browser as a website.